Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Dia Mafira Setiawan Putri. I'm from TBIA. Now I will explain about language change. This is my name. Okay. I will explain about the first is variation and change. And the second, how do change spread? And the second, how do we study language change? And last but not least, reasons for language change. Okay, the first is variation and change. Language varies in three major ways which are interestingly interrelated over time in physical space and socially. Language change variation over time has its origin in spatial or regional and socio variation. The source of change over time is always occurrence variation. Okay, all language change has its origin in variation. The possibility of a linguistic change exists as soon as a new form develops and begins to be used alongside an existing form. If the new form spreads, the change is in progress. If it eventually displaces the old form, the change has become a fait accompli. One area of vocabulary where this is very easy to see is in the slang words used by young people to mean really good. Okay. A sound change occurs when one sound is replaced in people's speech by another over a period of time, or when a sound disappears. As will be illustrated below, the process is the same. For example, in New Zealand, words like new and nuclear were once pronounced new and gu and nuclear. Right now, there is variation in the community. A new norm has been introduced. Young people are increasingly using an American pronunciation without the G. New and nuclear. Over time, it seems likely that the pronunciation without G will displace the G pronunciation in most people's speech. Okay, post-vocalic R. Accents with post-vocalic R are called rhotic. In many parts of England and Wales, Standard English has lost the pronunciation of R, following vowels in words like star and star. Post-vocalic R does not occur in RP, nor in the London Cockney dialect. The loss of post-vocalic R seems to have begun in the 17th century in the southeast of England, and it is still in progress since there are areas such as the southwest of England where R is still regularly pronounced. The spread of vernacular forms. This sound change, which seems to be unconscious, was a change to a more conservative pronunciation which used to be associated with the area in the past. It had been dying out, but it was revitalized to express solidarity between those who identified with the island and felt loyalty to its rural values and peaceful lifestyle. The centralization of the vowel in light was particularly significant for signaling Islander identity. So, not all linguistic change involves adapting new forms from outside the speech community, nor do they always involve from which people are conscious of as prestigious forms. Okay, coins and coinization. A languages, coins and coinization language that appear in places where people have the same language but have different dialects. For example, in Jawa Timur. Jawa Timur have any dialect. There are Surabaya Javanese language, Ponorogo Javanese language, and Malang Javanese language, or Nganjuk Javanese language. There are many dialects. There are different dialects, which then appears a new dialect that is not from the existing dialect was then agreed, and then they are agreed about the new dialect that is appear. So this is part of the language change. How do change spread? Okay, how do change spread? The first is from group to group. Social factors such as age, status, gender, and region affects the rate of change and the directions in which the waves roll most swiftly. The wave metaphor is one useful way of visualizing the spread of a change from one group to another. The second is from style to style. In the speech of a particular individual, in the case, the change spread from one style to another, say from more formal speech to more casual speech, while at the same time it spread from one individual to another within a social group and subsequently from one social group to another. And the last is from word to word. Sound change typically spread through different words one by one. This is called lexical diffusion. When the sound change begins, all the words with a particular vowel don't change at once in the speech of a community. Of course, the change often doesn't spread to all the possible words which could be affected. So there are often some words which remain with the original pronunciation. How do we study language change? Appearance time studies of language change. Comparing the speech of people from different age groups can be a useful clue then to language change. This has been called the apparent time method of studying change. Differences between the speech of older people and younger people are interpreted as indications of change in progress. Younger speakers tend to use more of the newer of innovative forms, and the older speakers use more of the older conservative forms, the ones they adopt in their own teenagers. When the change involves the spread of a prestige from or an admired usage, then it is easy to see the evidence of its spread. Second, language change in real time. The apparent time method of studying language change is a useful shortcut for sociolinguistics who generally cannot afford to wait around for 20 years to see what happens in real time. Sometimes, however, it is possible to build on the work of earlier linguists when studying change. Dictionaries which provide the date when a form was first known can assist in tracing change in vocabulary over time. The Linguistic Atlas of New England provided a description of the pronunciations of an earlier generation, and so change in pronunciation which had occurred and the island over a 20 to 30 period could be identified. The last is reasons for language change. Social status and language change. Linguistic change may enter an speech community through any social group, but that different types of of change are associated with different groups. Members of the group with most social status, for example, tend to introduce change into a speech community for neighboring communities which have greater status and prestige in their eyes. And then the gender and language change. Differences in women's and men's speech are another source of variation which can result in linguistic change. Sometimes women are the innovators leading a linguistic change, and sometimes men. Women tend to be associated with change toward both prestige and vernacular norms, whereas men more often introduce vernacular change. And the last is interaction and language change. Interaction and contact between people is crucial in providing the channels for linguistic change. Linguistic change generally progresses most slowly in tightly knit communities which have little contact with the outside world. There are plenty of examples of places where isolation have contributed to linguistic conservatism. One of the best known examples of linguistic conservatism is Iceland. Icelandic has altered relatively little since the 13th century, and it has developed very little dialectal variation. By contrast, during the same period, English has changed radically and has been characterized by gross dialectal variation. Okay, I think